I'll tell you about investing in affordable housing, but my angle is a bit different. It's more so studying the growth areas in the state of Florida. So a bit about my background, born and raised in Orlando. Raise your hand if you're from Orlando originally. That's less than half the room.
Third generation?
Yeah, so there's a few and everything. So being born and raised here, I wanted to see the world because everybody was from somewhere else except me. I'm like, they're like, where are you from? So I was from here, like born and raised here, like ORMC. Like, are you just from Orlando? So my goal was to see the world. Lived in Israel, Afghanistan, California, Massachusetts, Texas, Arizona. Came back home last summer of 22 and everything, with my wife, and my son is now 4-month-old. So it's pretty busy, but it's a blessing to be here. So with that being said, Ms. Pollock, I see you and everything. Those who want a Ameris Bank, great bank executive, and she's a veteran too. But it empowers me to see those veterans who are now giving back, but also ones who are doing well in business. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. So indelible, last slide real quick. I assist with a firm that is internal audit, regulatory compliance called Indelible. And what we do is we run hurricane recovery centers for the state of Florida. We do federal compliance, major projects for counties, for states. Whenever there's an emergency, we're there to help. Helping human services and other skill sets that we help the state with and counties with. Next slide. All right, so affordable housing. What is it? Obviously, it says what it is. That's the official definition. After this, I'll go into what it is and also what also is attainable housing. When people hear affordable housing, they think a certain thing. Next slide. Attainable versus affordable housing. Affordable housing specifically, there's always it's synonymous with public housing, but also with attainable housing. That's housing that's affordable to those households earning 81% to 100% of the AMI. Next slide. There's pros and cons, positives and negatives. Again, this is all research, so I'm saying it from a neutral view. So some of the pros are public housing uses land owned by the Public Housing Authority and financial subsidies specifically available to public housing authorities or nonprofits. Someone may say a pro is physically indistinguishable from the market rate housing. That's always a goal for affordable housing. Next, con that people say, again, I'm not an expert, but I'll tell you what my angle is in a second. Next, the cons is neighborhood property owners are often concerned that the affordable housing development will not look attractive. There's a con that somebody may have just for you to think as investors. A reduction in property values is a concern from community opposition. Next slide. Now, there's cost of not having affordable housing and everything. And essentially affordable housing is sometimes referred to as workforce housing. This is because affordable housing serves the needs of people employed in the jobs that we rely upon to make communities viable. Also, approximately 10% of all elderly households live in affordable housing. And essentially, with affordable housing, improves the economic health of an area. So it enhances the livability for everybody. With Florida growing, this is going to be an ongoing topic. And I'll tell you in the next few slides about the money the state is giving to address affordable housing needs. Next slide. Obviously, with developing, there's a process with the planning, financing, and obviously regulatory reform. Next slide. So, according to the latest data from the U.S. Census, Florida ranks #1 in total net migration, which measures the difference between the number of people moving in and the moving people out of the state. So, what this is saying that our state is constantly growing. And because of COVID, people now working from anywhere, you're going to see an influx of people coming to Florida who need housing. Next slide. Now, the fastest growing cities in Florida, obviously you see it there. This is all public information. And as you think about investing in affordable housing, investing in property, start to look at some of these trends. Next slide. Obviously, in terms of the fastest growing cities, this is based on U.S. News & World Report and a few other sites and everything. So, but anywhere where there's tourism, commerce, there's always going to be growth. Next slide. So, as you look at the growth areas, when I was in the state of Florida, what we did specifically was look at certain industries that were coming to Florida. A lot of financial services, aviation, aerospace, and as you look, and what we did was a thing called cluster maps. And as we look at the cluster maps, certain areas, in which they were growing, whether it's I-4 corridor, the Space Coast, because of the industries there, Panhandle, the industries there, all the military bases in which people want to start aerospace and defense companies. That's where you would see a lot of growth. And the question is, where will people live? So I'll probably have Bridget send this out to you all. Yes, but as you look at the growth areas, the hot spots are really where affordable housing and also attainable housing will be needed as you look to invest. Next slide. So with the future growth, obviously us being seeing the market, whether it's manufacturing, and I had a citation down here, but essentially this comes from the state of Florida, Enterprise Florida, and other sites. You have the Panhandle military installations. Whenever there's military installations, you have the federal government giving billions to those installations, so obviously you see growth. So as you look where the growth is happening, whether it's McGill, whether it's with the Southcom or SOCOM, but also with the aerospace and defense industry, you saw constant influx of aerospace and defense industry entities going towards the Space Coast. Obviously NASA, that you will never go wrong there with that part of the state growing. But also as you start to invest, that's going to be a major thing. I see you, Jasmine Birdie, in the back and everything. But real quick, next slide. So a part of it is you look at the federal funding. You have a thing called CBDG, Community Development Block Grants. And this is not necessarily attached to affordable housing, but it comes from HUD. So whenever there's a hurricane, whenever there's a storm, you have hundreds of millions given down to counties. Seminole County, I know the mayor spoke and everything. Counties will give that money to cities. So that's one pot of money that could go into housing, could go into housing concerns, affordable housing, attainable housing, or people who had issues with their homes. So as you look at the state, the federal funds that will be given, that is really where you'll start to see a lot of people investing when it comes to affordable and attainable housing. Next slide. So you have the Florida Housing Coalition. Laura, let's come here real quick. So basically you have this is the entity in the state of Florida that oversees affordable and attainable housing. And what they do specifically is they'll oversee the federal dollars going out to the state of Florida for affordable housing issues. But for 1 minute, I'm going to have somebody speak about his experience living in affordable housing, the importance of those who are going to invest in that.
Thanks, Jamal. First and foremost, I just want to say thank you. Thank you to Bridget for bringing us all together, and thank you for all the former military or current military members for protecting our borders. So just give yourselves a round of applause, please. I won't hold you up. I just want to talk to you as a survivor of someone who's experienced homelessness. And not just homelessness, but foster care, and then you age out and then go into homelessness, right? Just think about being a young person with all the different struggles of being young and knowing everything, right? On top of that, if you mess up, you have no one to go home to. And so when we talk about affordable housing and we talk about this crisis that we're all experiencing, some of the most vulnerable people are some of the kids that are aging out of foster care. About 3 years ago, I left a place called Foundation for Foster Children. Laura Cosgrove was my boss. So she held me down until I found myself. What I want to share with you guys today was more so when the youth that we see today that eventually end up being you, myself, taxpayers, without the support, without the affordable housing concepts that we're trying to generate here, without the funding, without the direction, without the nonprofits working in tandem, not in silos, but in tandem to provide them with the support that they need, they end up being homeless, and it adds to our negative score as a state. So what does that do for John Doe, who wants to come here from California with a great idea and $2 billion? He's going somewhere else because of our homeless population. So I don't want to take up a whole lot of your time. It's kind of hot up here. And Jamal, I didn't think he was going to call me up really. But I just want to implore you guys to look into some of the nonprofits that are hard at work on the ground level, providing support to some of the most vulnerable people here in Central Florida, okay? So I've got a ton of cards with me. My assistant, she printed them out, so I want to give them all to you guys. If you have any questions, if you're interested at all in finding out about affordable housing when it comes to youth and youth development, please see me before you leave. Thank you.
Next slide. more left. I know it's hot in here. So essentially, you have the state support. See these websites and everything. I won't go through it too much. You have the Sadowski Act. Last year, the state gave about $117 million funding for affordable housing developments. Again, $117 million. That's just a start. So again, if you look at state funding to see where the dollars are going, as an investor, this is going to be a start of a lot of major projects being developed in the state of Florida, because this issue is not going away anytime soon. Obviously, the governor signed legislation to support economic development through the housing programs, and also obviously lawmakers passed $711 million to address this issue. So as you see the articles come out and about the topics, this is something that for an investor, this is going to be probably one of the best times to start doing it if you have not done it already. Next slide. Oh, okay, my information. But real quick, last slide. As you look at the articles and look at what's going on now in the state, with the constant growth, when I was graduating high school in 2000, we were a state of about maybe 10 million people. Now we're 22 million people. And regardless of what people think about Florida, you will always have an influx of people coming from everywhere because they don't want the cold weather, they may not want Texas or California, or the Midwest or Northeast. So they'll come here, and the issue of affordable housing has to be addressed, but also the investors are going to do very well because businesses, they're concerned about the homeless population. So the question is, where will people live? We don't want to become San Francisco. Don't want to become LA and everything. And so, what do you say?
Austin.
Austin, yeah, Austin. So with the state dollars, as you all look to invest in areas, whether it's the Jacksonville, Orlando, Tampa Bay, Miami, or even the Space Coast, affordable housing is going to be a hot political issue. And with that hot political issue, there's going to come funding. And when there comes funding, that is going to allow you as an investor to see, oh, they're going to spend $1 billion this session. Next session, it could be higher. So as those funding dollars come down, that is going to be something that you look into as an investor. So that is the end for me, because I know we have some fun things afterwards.